Eleanor Park had survived blood-soaked shifts, last-minute codes, and the bone-deep exhaustion that came from working too many nights at Seoul General. But nothing in her entire career prepared her for the sound that tore through the hospital courtyard that night. A child, screaming. Not the cry of a kid throwing a tantrum, but a desperate broken sound that sliced through the cold air like glass. Eleanor froze, the weight of her backpack dragging on her shoulder, her scrub still stained with the remnants of a shift she wanted to forget. Every instinct whispered the same warning. Keep walking. Mind your business. Stay alive. But Eleanor wasn't built that way. She turned. She ran. Behind the emergency building, under the flickering security light, she saw them. Two masked men dragging a small boy toward a waiting black van. A boy no older than 6, Korean, tiny arms flailing, voice shaking with terror. "Hey!" Eleanor's voice cracked through the night, louder than she intended. "Let him go!" Both men jerked toward her. One reached for something beneath his jacket. Eleanor stepped in front of the boy, heart hammering. "Run behind me!" she whispered, never taking her eyes off the threat. "Hide! Don't look back!" The boy clutched the back of her scrubs, sobbing. The men lunged. Eleanor braced, shouting for security, for anyone. Footsteps thundered from the main entrance, flashlights cut across the asphalt, and the two attackers bolted into the shadows. Silence crashed after them. Eleanor sank to her knees, pulling the shaking child into her arms. His small hands knotted into her uniform, his breath coming in broken sobs. My name is Dong," he whispered. "Please, don't let them take me. They said they'd hurt Appa." Eleanor tightened her hold, instinctively rocking him. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." That was when she heard it, the screech of tires. A black SUV whipped into the emergency driveway, doors flying open before the vehicle fully stopped. A man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, tattoos wrapping down both arms, silver hair catching the harsh hospital lights. His expression was lethal, eyes scanning with the precision of a predator, hunting the thing that dared touch what was his. And when his gaze landed on the boy in her arms, the rage melted. Something fragile, terrified, almost human, flickered across his features. "Donga," he breathed. The boy launched out of Eleanor's hold and into the man's chest, crying harder. "Appa." Eleanor's stomach tightened. This wasn't a passerby. This wasn't some businessman rushing to his child. There was power in the way he stood, violence simmering under his skin, a cold, commanding aura that made even the security guards hesitate. And yet, the way he held his son, as if the child was the only thing keeping him alive, was enough to make Eleanor's chest ache. When his eyes finally lifted to hers, gratitude and danger collided in a single, devastating look. "You saved my son," he said, quietly. Eleanor swallowed, suddenly aware that her life had just veered into something she didn't understand, something she might not be able to walk away from. Because the boy she protected wasn't ordinary, and the man staring at her, like she'd just rewritten his entire world, was Beom Seok. A name people only whispered, a name tied to Korea's darkest underworld. But Eleanor didn't know any of that. Not yet. And this night, this scream in the dark, was only the beginning. Eleanor had spent years training to save lives, but she never imagined that saving one child would pull her into a world built on blood, loyalty, and shadows she wasn't prepared to face. For a moment, the night held stillness, only the small, uneven breaths of Dong and the harsh glow of the emergency lights cutting through the darkness. Then the courtyard exploded with noise. Police cars screeched to a stop. Officers poured out in a wave of black uniforms, radios crackling. But instead of rushing toward Eleanor or the scene of the attempted abduction, their focus shifted, oddly, sharply, toward the man holding his trembling son, toward Beom Seok. The first officer to approach slowed his steps. His spine stiffened. His voice dropped into a careful, calculating politeness. "Sir, we'll secure the perimeter. Sir, not Mr. Not. What happened here? But the kind of respectful address given to someone with power, real power, someone they didn't want to anger." Eleanor swallowed. One detective, older and braver than the rest, approached her with a notepad. "Ma'am, we'll need a statement, but not tonight." His eyes flicked toward Beom Seok, and something unspoken passed between them. "Come by the station tomorrow, morning or afternoon, whenever you can." Eleanor nodded, but as the adrenaline drained all at once, her legs wobbled. A shiver crawled up her spine. Everything she'd been holding together, fear, shock, instinct, collapsed in a tidal wave that made her teeth chatter. She didn't think anyone noticed, but he did. Beom Seok stepped closer, shifting Dong to one arm. His free hand moved without hesitation, shrugging off his black suit jacket. He draped it around her shoulders with a gentleness that didn't match the dangerous aura rolling off him. "You're shaking." His voice was low, controlled, yet undeniably soft. Eleanor blinked, caught between gratitude and alarm. "I'm fine, just adrenaline crash." Dong lifted his head from his father's chest and immediately reached for her, tiny fingers gripping her sleeve. "Don't go," he whispered, voice still trembling. "Stay with me, please." The officers murmured among themselves, pretending not to watch. The detective looked like he wanted to intervene but thought better of it. Beom Seok exhaled slowly, gaze moving from his son's desperate grip to Eleanor's pale face. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, calculation, something else she couldn't name. He crouched so Dong could stand. "Dong, we're going home now." "No." The boy clung to her hand with both of his, shaking his head fiercely. "I want her." The vulnerability in his voice made Eleanor's throat tighten. Beom Seok's jaw flexed, but he didn't snap or bark orders. Instead, he lifted Dong again. "She saved you," he murmured, brushing the child's hair back. "Of course you want her close." Then, to Eleanor, "Thank you?" Again. His gaze lingered too long, not in a romantic way, more like he was studying her, mapping every detail, filing her away somewhere important. Dangerous. The kind of look that said he didn't believe in coincidences. He carried Dong toward the black SUV waiting at the curb, bodyguards stepping aside like trained shadows. Dong reached out for her once more. "Goodbye, Nuna." Eleanor raised her hand in a small wave. "Good night, Dong." The SUV door closed, the engine hummed, and, just like that, the world shifted again. Normalcy peeling back as those vehicles disappeared into the night. She walked home in a daze. Every step echoed with the image of Beom Seok's arms around his son, protective, trembling with suppressed fear. A man wrapped in shadows, yet cracked open by the thought of losing the tiny boy who clung to him like life itself. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself as she unlocked her apartment door. "It's over. You did your part, that's all." But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 3 a.m., she jolted awake, heart racing. She dreamed of masked men, of silver hair catching the moonlight, and Dong's small voice calling her something he had no reason to call her. Iama. Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest. It's just stress, she whispered. Just fear talking. But deep down, she felt it. The night wasn't done with her. Across the city, in a secluded compound guarded by men who never slept, Beom Seok watched his son finally drift into uneasy rest. Find out everything, he ordered quietly. Everyone near the hospital, everyone who saw anything, everyone who touched him. His men nodded. And start with the nurse? His gaze hardened, not with suspicion, but with something far more dangerous. Curiosity. Eleanor barely slept. Every time she drifted off, she saw flashes of last night. Dong's tear-streaked face buried against her shoulder. The glint of Beom Seok's silver hair under the harsh emergency lights. The police stepping around him like he was both royalty and a warning. By the time she arrived at the hospital for her shift, exhaustion pressed behind her eyes. She grabbed a chart, tied her scrubs, and tried to settle into the rhythm of work. She had just begun checking on a patient when she heard it. Angel nurse! Her head snapped up. Dong barreled into her legs like a tiny missile, arms wrapping around her in a fierce hug. Dong? She blinked, stunned. What are you doing here? Are you okay? I told Appa I need to see you, he said proudly. I dreamed you saved me again. Eleanor's heart softened, but before she could speak, a low voice cut through the hallway like warm steel. He wouldn't stop talking about you. She turned and froze. Beom Seok stood there, in a tailored black coat, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on her with a gaze that was too steady, too knowing. The fluorescent hospital lighting softened none of his edges. He looked just as he had last night, danger contained inside elegance, shadows wrapped in skin. We're here for follow-up checks, he added smoothly. Eleanor frowned. Follow-up? But Dong wasn't injured. He checked out fine with the EMTs. A single shoulder lifted. I prefer being thorough. Dong nodded vigorously, still hugging her leg. Appa said we can check everything if it means I can see you. Ah, so that was the real reason? Eleanor knelt down, brushing a hand over Dong's hair. I'm glad you're okay. He beamed at her like those words were sunlight. But as she stood again, something prickled at the back of her neck. She glanced down the hallway and her stomach tightened. Two men in black suits stood near the elevators, hands clasped in front of them. Another leaned casually against the wall near the nurses' station. They weren't hospital staff, and despite their calm expressions, they were scanning every movement, every face. Eleanor's breath hitched. They didn't look like men who'd come for a routine checkup. You brought security to a pediatric ward? She asked quietly. Beom Seok's eyes followed hers, then returned to her face. They're here for my peace of mind. Peace? The word didn't fit him. Not with the tension coiled beneath his voice. Not with the way every guard seemed to treat him like gravity itself. Don't worry, he added. They won't disturb you or interfere with your work. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that their presence said something loud and clear. Last night isn't over. Still, she forced a polite smile and guided Dong to an exam room. She listened to him chatter about superhero cartoons, his favorite snacks, and how she was the only one who stopped the bad guys. When the checkup ended and Dong clung to her again, Beom Seok stepped closer. We'll get out of your way. Thank you for seeing him. There was a pause. longer than it needed to be. His gaze lingered again, studying her the way he had in the parking lot, like he was trying to understand something about her that didn't fit into the world he knew. "Would you like me to walk you home after your shift?" he asked. The question was too casual, too intentional. Eleanor's pulse spiked. "No, no, thank you. I'll be fine." A faint, unreadable smile touched his mouth. "If you say so." Then he turned, his men closing around him and Dong like a moving fortress. Her shift dragged, but the unease only grew. Every time she passed a window, she felt eyes on her. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart lurched. By the time she walked home, the sun was long gone, and her building felt too quiet. She had just hung her coat when knock, knock, knock. Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she opened the door. A stranger stood there, black suit, expression blank. "Delivery for Miss Eleanor," he said, offering a small gift box. She hesitated. I I didn't order anything. It's from someone who is grateful." Before she could respond, he bowed slightly and walked away. Her hands shook as she closed and locked the door. Inside the box was a folded note written in childish handwriting. "Thank you for saving me." Dong Eleanor smiled until she saw the second item, a sleek, expensive phone, latest model, unopened. A typed card beneath it read, "For your safety." BS. Her breath caught, not a thank you, not a gift, a warning. A line drawn around her without permission. She was being watched, protected, claimed. Eleanor tried telling herself that nothing had changed, that the gift, unexpected, expensive, unsettling, was simply a thank you. That the stranger at her door had been nothing more than a messenger. That the men she'd seen around the hospital were there for routine reasons. But the next morning, when she stepped out of her apartment building, she froze. A black SUV idled across the street, windows tinted, engine humming. It wasn't the same car from last night, but it had the same presence, heavy, watching. She forced herself to keep walking. The hospital wasn't much better. As she approached the entrance, she spotted another black vehicle near the ambulance bay. Different make, same tinted windows. Coincidence? She wanted to believe that. But when she walked inside, the front desk nurses were whispering, leaning close, eyes darting toward the pediatrics hallway. "He's still here. Did you see the tattoo on his neck? Standing there like he owns the hospital. Who comes to pediatrics looking like that?" Eleanor slowed, heart pounding. Her eyes followed theirs, and she nearly tripped over her own feet. Beom Seok was leaning against the wall just outside the pediatric wing, arms crossed, black shirt hugging his frame, sleeves rolled to reveal the swirling tattoos she hadn't noticed before. Not decorative, a story inked in symbols and warnings. His gaze snapped to hers the moment she appeared. He straightened, and everyone suddenly found somewhere else to look. Eleanor swallowed. "You shouldn't be here. I'm waiting for you," he said, simply. His voice was calm, but his eyes, those sharp, winter-cold eyes, softened when they landed on her. Before she could respond, Dong burst from the playroom and ran straight into her arms. "Angel nurse," he beamed. "Appa said we could see you again." "Oh, did he?" she murmured, trying to keep her voice steady. Dong nodded. Appa has lots of boring meetings today. The night ones where people come back hurt, but say they're fine." Eleanor froze. Beom Seok went rigid behind them. She pulled back slightly. "Dong, what do you mean?" He blinked innocently. "The meetings. The ones where Appa makes men kneel and talk very slow and serious. He whispered the next part. Sometimes they cry. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Before she could process it, Beom Seok stepped forward. Donga, enough. His voice was gentle, but carried a warning beneath it. Dong pouted but obeyed, wandering back into the room with a coloring sheet. Eleanor turned to Beom Seok, pulse hammering. What meetings is he talking about? He didn't blink. Nothing you need to worry about. She stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated. You told me you're a businessman. I am. Businessmen don't have armed men in hospitals. No reaction. Businessmen don't have children who talk about people coming back hurt. A flicker. Subtle, but real. And businessmen, she whispered, don't leave unmarked cars outside my apartment. Silence stretched between them. He didn't deny it. She exhaled shakily. What are you hiding? Why does your son need protection? Beom Seok's jaw clenched. This conversation is not safe here. I don't care about safe. Her voice rose before she could stop it. I care about Dong. And if you expect me to keep helping him, hell, if you expect me to even speak to you, then I deserve the truth. Several passing nurses slowed, pretending not to eavesdrop. Beom Seok's expression shifted. Subtle, frighteningly calm, the calm of a predator calculating whether he should retreat or strike. He looked at her with quiet intensity. There are things I cannot tell you. Then I can't help Dong anymore. The words came out before she could reconsider them. They hung in the air, sharp, final. For the first time, she saw it. Not anger, not arrogance, fear, flickering behind his eyes. Fear of losing her. Fear of losing the one person his son trusted without hesitation. His voice, when it came, was lower, rougher. Please don't say that, she faltered. This was not the man the world feared. This was not the man whose presence made police step back. This was a father, terrified, and that terrified her. She took a slow breath. If you want me to be anywhere near Dong, you need to stop lying. He looked down, breathing once, deeply, as if he were deciding of two impossible choices, which one would hurt less. When he lifted his head again, something in him had settled, hardened. Eleanor, he murmured, the truth is not something you walk back from. I'm not asking for everything. Just enough to understand why I'm suddenly surrounded by men in black. He hesitated, 1 second too long. She stepped back. That's my answer. Fine. She turned to leave. Eleanor? Her name sounded like a command, like a plea. She didn't turn around, not even when Dong called her name from down the hall. Not even when she heard the soft curse in Korean slip past Beom Seok's lips. She walked to the break room, her heart pounding in her throat. She needed space. She needed clarity. She needed voices, low voices. She stopped just outside the doorway. Beom Seok's footsteps moved behind her, but he wasn't following her. He was answering his ringing phone. His voice chilled the air, cold, controlled, deadly. Kayobwa, erase it, a pause. Modu, all of them, another pause. His tone sharpened to a blade. Erase the threats. Immediately. Every hair on Eleanor's arm stood up. This wasn't a businessman. This wasn't a protective father. This was a man whose words could decide whether someone lived or disappeared without a trace. And he had just given an order, because she demanded the truth. Her heart thundered as she slipped into the break room, shutting the door quietly behind her. Her world, once predictable, once safe, had just collided with something far darker than she ever imagined, and she had no idea how deep the shadows went. The next morning felt wrong before Eleanor even opened her eyes. Her phone buzzed nonstop, notifications stacking one after another. At first, she ignored them, assuming it was the group chat with other nurses ranting about overtime again. But the vibration wouldn't stop. Persistent, urgent. She finally reached for it. A headline flashed across her lock screen: Warehouse Explosion. Outside Seoul, multiple dead. Police suspect organized crime connection. Eleanor sat up so fast her spine screamed. She clicked the article. Footage of a burning warehouse filled the screen. Twisted metal, black smoke, scorched concrete. Firefighters moved like ghostly silhouettes around the edges of the destruction. But that wasn't what made her stomach plunge. It was the faces. 3 blurry photos of the suspected traffickers. One of them she recognized instantly. The man who had grabbed her wrist outside the alley. The one whose breath had smelled like old cigarettes. The one who had smiled when she'd screamed. She dropped the phone. It hit the blanket with a soft thud, but the sound echoed like gunfire inside her head. Her heartbeat turned sharp and metallic. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't karma. This was a message that came straight from Beom Seok. She found him in the pediatric hallway that afternoon, standing near the window with his hands behind his back. He didn't look like a father waiting for his son's checkup. He looked like a man giving orders without speaking, calm, collected, lethal. Eleanor didn't wait for him to notice her. She marched straight up to him. "You knew?" she said, voice trembling with anger she didn't bother to hide. "Didn't you?" Beom Seok turned slowly. His expression was unreadable. Not cold, not warm, simply controlled. "What happened?" he asked softly, like he didn't already know. She shoved her phone toward him. The warehouse explosion. He didn't even look at the screen. One sound, casual, unbothered. It was confirmation enough. "They're dead," she whispered. "Those men, the ones who tried to take Dong, the one who grabbed me." His jaw tightened, just barely. "Yes, you killed them. I protected my son." Her lungs tightened, like the air around them had shrunk. "Do you even hear yourself? This isn't protection. This is necessary." His voice sliced through hers, quiet but unshakable. "No," Eleanor said, stepping back. "No, this is monstrous." Beom Seok didn't flinch. "What would you have done if someone threatened your child?" His eyes flicked toward the room where Dong was playing with a nurse. "Called the police? Filed a report? Hoped they didn't return?" That doesn't justify. It justifies everything. There was no pride in his tone, no arrogance, just truth. Truth from a man who had lived too many nights in the dark to pretend the world was safe. Eleanor shook her head, feeling her throat close. "I can't. I don't know how to look at you right now." His face finally cracked, only a fraction, but enough for her to see something raw flicker beneath the surface. Fear, not of the law, not of death, but of her, of losing her. He took a slow breath. "Eleanor, don't say my name like that." Her hands trembled. "You do terrible things, and then you walk around like a calm father bringing his son to therapy." "For Dong," he murmured, voice low. "I would burn the world." Her chest tightened painfully. This man was both savior and nightmare. A man who would kill to protect them. A man who had already killed. Before she could respond, a small voice interrupted the thick, suffocating silence. "Eleanor!" Dong barreled toward her, arms wide, smile bright. She caught him automatically, pulling him into her chest, his little arms wrapped around her neck, warm and trusting. She felt Beom Seok watching. When she looked up, he wasn't the calculating man of shadows anymore. Not entirely. Something softer, almost aching, flickered in his eyes as he watched his son cling to her, like she was safety itself. Appa, Dong said, turning slightly but not letting go of her. Can Eleanor come home with us today? Beom Seok swallowed hard. Eleanor set Dong down gently. I have to go. And she left before the hallway could choke her again. But as she walked away, her heart stayed twisted behind her, caught somewhere between fear, truth, and a man with blood on his hands who looked at her like she was the only thing he couldn't lose. Eleanor spent the entire week trying and failing to pull herself out of their orbit. Every time she turned a corner at the hospital, she expected to see a tall man in a black suit. Every time she transferred a patient, she half expected to hear small footsteps running toward her with a breathless, Eleanor, Nuna! She tried to cut ties, avoid pediatrics, avoid shadows, avoid anything that smelled like danger wrapped in silk. But Dong cried for her every night. She heard it from another nurse. Apparently, the little boy refused to sleep unless someone promised that his angel nurse would visit again someday. The guilt pressed on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake off. So she stayed late for her shift, charting quietly, convincing herself she was doing the right thing by stepping back. That illusion shattered when she entered the underground parking garage. A soft, metallic clang echoed. Something, or someone, shifted behind a concrete pillar. Eleanor froze. Then a figure stepped into the flickering light. Beom Seok. His white shirt was soaked through on one side, darkening fast. Blood dripped from his fingers. His jaw clenched, breath ragged, yet he stood tall as if forcing his body not to buckle. Beom Seok? Her voice came out a whisper, a frightened one. He exhaled slowly, relief hidden beneath the exhaustion. I didn't mean to scare you. Oh my God, you're hurt. Eleanor rushed to him before her brain caught up with her feet. He swayed. She caught him. Up close, she saw the gash along his ribs, the bruising on his arm, the tear in his jacket like someone had dragged a blade across it. Without thinking, her training took over. Sit. Now. She guided him to the ground before he collapsed. He obeyed. Eleanor ripped open her emergency kit, hands trembling but precise. What happened? A misunderstanding, he murmured. You were ambushed, she hissed, pressing gauze firmly to his wound. His eyes met hers, dark, unguarded, honest in a way she'd never seen. Yes. Silence hung between them, thick and electric. She cleaned and wrapped the wound with quick, practiced movements. When she leaned back, breath shaky, she finally spoke the question biting at her for days. Why does this keep happening around you? Around Dong? Beom Seok's lips pressed into a harsh line. Because of what I am. And what are you? Her whisper echoed off the concrete. He hesitated. For the first time since she met him, he looked unsure. Not of himself, but of what losing her might feel like. I lead an organization, he finally said. One that survives by eliminating threats before those threats can destroy us. He looked at the stained floor. I didn't want you touched by this world. Her blood went cold. Eliminating, she swallowed. That warehouse fire on the news, and the bodies, and the men who attacked Dong. They would have come back, he said, quietly. They don't stop. So you killed them. Her chest tightened. Because you wanted to protect him. Protect your son. Yes. His voice was steady, unapologetic. I protected him. Eleanor felt the room tilt. Fear, anger, relief, heartbreak. Everything collided inside her. She stepped back. I can't be part of this. Beom Seok looked up sharply. A moment of raw emotion flickered in his gaze. Fear. Not of the world. Not of death. Of her walking away. He pushed through the pain and stood. Too close. Too tall. Too intense. You already are, he said softly. My son loves you. Her heart thrashed in her chest. And He stopped himself, breath unsteady. His jaw tightened, as though the rest of the sentence was too dangerous to release. Suddenly, distant sirens began to echo from above the garage. Beom Seok's head snapped toward the exit. His men were approaching. She could sense it before he spoke. I have to go, he murmured. And, before she could say anything, ask him to stay, demand answers, tell him to stop making her feel things she had no right to feel. He slipped into the shadows, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had lived in danger long enough to wear it like a second skin. Eleanor remained kneeling on the cold concrete, breath shaking, hands stained with his blood. She should have been terrified. Instead, she realized something far worse. She had feelings she never wanted, and they were only growing. The next evening, Eleanor stood on the hospital rooftop, the wind cold against her skin, the city glowing beneath her like a restless sea. She hadn't planned to come here. She hadn't planned for anything. Not the bleeding man in the garage, not the way her heart had raced when he vanished. Not the sleepless night filled with images of dark eyes and a child calling her name. But when Beom Seok's men quietly approached her during her shift and said, he needs to speak with you, something in her already knew she would go. And now, he was here, standing across from her in a fitted black coat, the fading bruise on his jaw casting a shadow. He looked like danger sculpted into a man. And yet, exhaustion softened the edges of him. He didn't approach. He waited. Eleanor swallowed, suddenly aware of how alone they were. No bodyguards, no watchers, no dong, just them. Why am I here? She asked, though the answer pulsed in her chest. Beom Seok stepped forward, slow, restrained. Because we can't keep circling each other like this. His voice was low, carrying over the hum of the city. You deserve the truth. And a choice. He came to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I will give you an ultimatum, he said quietly, and whatever you choose, I will abide by it. Eleanor's fingers curled on the railing. Beom Seok. He raised a hand, gentle, asking her to let him finish. Walk away now, he said, and I will protect you from afar. You will never see me again, but my men will make sure nothing touches you for as long as I breathe. Her heart twisted painfully. Or, his voice roughened, emotions slipping through the cracks. Stay, and I will do everything in my power to keep you safe beside me. Not hidden away, not pushed aside, beside me. Eleanor's breath caught. The city lights flickered like stars reflected in storm water, but none of it felt real compared to the intensity in his gaze. He inhaled shakily. There is more I should have said before. Things I should have admitted. He turned fully toward her. I am falling for you. The words were soft, almost hesitant, like a confession, dragged from the deepest part of him, the part that didn't know how to be gentle, but was trying anyway. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment because the world tilted under her feet. She thought of Dong, the boy whose small hands clung to her scrubs, whose nightmares quieted when she sat beside him. She thought of Beom Seok, the man who commanded armies with a whisper, who could shatter lives with a word, who bled in the garage and still looked at her like she was the safest place in his world. Terrifying, tender, wrong, right, all at once. She opened her eyes. "I'm not walking away," she whispered. A single, sharp inhale escaped him, like he had been holding his breath for years, and finally, let it go. His shoulders lowered, the tension bleeding from him in a way she'd never seen. Eleanor. Her name sounded different in his voice now. Reverent, fragile, almost disbelieving. He reached for her slowly, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing lightly across her skin. A tremor passed through him, controlled but unmistakable. Eleanor's breath stuttered. He leaned in, not with the force she feared, not with the dominance he carried like a second skin, but with an aching softness that didn't belong to a man like him. Their lips met, a soft kiss, hesitant, dangerous. Her heart fluttered, then crashed. His breath mixed with hers, warm and unsteady. His hand slid to the back of her neck, guiding her closer with a tenderness that contradicted everything he was capable of. When they finally pulled apart, the city felt too quiet, the night too still. "We can't go back now," he whispered against her lips. Eleanor didn't look away. "I know." The compound wasn't a home. It was a fortress. High walls, silent cameras, guards who bowed sharply whenever Eleanor passed. None of it felt like a place an ordinary woman should belong. And yet, when Dong ran across the polished floors each morning shouting, "Yama! Yama!" with his little drawings clenched in his fists, something inside her softened. She wasn't supposed to stay here. It was only temporary. For protection, Beom Seok had said. But every time Dong curled into her side while watching cartoons, every time she stumbled into the kitchen at dawn to find Beom Seok already there, sipping black coffee and quietly watching her like she were the only light he understood. Temporary felt like a lie she didn't want to challenge. Their worlds overlapped in slow, cautious steps. Beom Seok never intruded on her space, but he was always nearby. A shadow, built of sharp edges and surprising gentleness. When she wandered the garden with Dong, picking fallen petals from the path, she'd look up and catch him leaning against a gatepost, arms crossed, eyes soft, pretending he wasn't watching them. He was always watching, and she didn't mind. But the differences between them were impossible to ignore. At midnight, just when she was drifting into sleep, the low murmur of Beom Seok's voice seeped through the hallway. Coded Korean, cold, measured. A tone that belonged to the man who burned warehouses, not the man who kissed her on rooftops. Eleanor would lie still, listening, fear and longing twisting together until she couldn't breathe. Other nights, he returned with a cut on his lip or bruising under his collar. Small signs, but enough to spike her pulse. Once, when she touched a darkening mark at his jaw, he closed his eyes, leaning into her hand as if her worry anchored him. "I'm fine," he'd murmured. But she didn't believe him, and he knew it. Their connection deepened in the quiet moments between danger. Shared breakfasts where Dong shoved toast into Beom Seok's mouth and giggled when he pretended to choke. Soft conversations on the balcony where Eleanor told him about her patients. And he listened, like her voice soothed parts of him he didn't know needed healing. Still, the shadows never fully left. One evening, after putting Dong to bed, Eleanor stepped into the hallway and found Beom Seok waiting. Not in his usual composed posture, but leaning against the wall, head bowed, hands clenched at his sides. She froze. Beom Seok? He lifted his gaze, and the vulnerability there took her breath. I never believed I could have a future like this, he said, voice rough. You and Dong. His throat worked around the words. You make me want to be better. Eleanor's chest tightened painfully. He wasn't asking for absolution. He wasn't pretending to be a man he wasn't. He was showing her the fracture inside him, the part that didn't know how to live outside violence. Then be better, she whispered. Silence settled between them, soft but heavy. He stepped closer until she could feel his breath, warm and uneven, brushing her cheek. His hand rose, fingers brushing her jaw, as though he feared she might disappear if he touched her too firmly. I will try, he murmured. The promise wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but something shifted, like the air around them recognized the weight of it. The next morning, the compound buzzed with subdued urgency. Men moved quietly, speaking into radios, exchanging files. Eleanor noticed Beom Seok on the phone, voice sharper than she'd heard in weeks, but his eyes flicked toward her and softened. Later that day, he approached her in the garden, Dong playing at their feet. I've decided to dismantle parts of my network, he said. Eleanor's breath hitched. That's dangerous. His jaw tightened. Everything I do is dangerous, but I want a different path. For him. He looked at Dong, then back at her. For us. For a moment, the world felt still. Her heart wasn't ready for promises, not from a man like him. But as Dong ran toward them, crashing into their legs with a laugh, Eleanor realized something quietly profound. Danger or not, she was already part of this family, already part of him. And he, dark, deadly, complicated, was trying to become someone worthy of being loved. 6 months passed, softening the edges of everything. The compound, once echoing with tension and the quiet menace of armed men, felt different now. Calmer, warmer. Life threaded through it in ways Eleanor never thought possible. Fresh flowers Dong picked from the garden sitting in tall glass jars. Laughter echoing through hallways that once carried only coded whispers, and the soft thud of Beom Seok's footsteps as he returned home earlier and earlier each night. They were married now. A small ceremony held under lantern lights behind the compound, Dong standing proudly between them with a flower crown slipping over his eyes. Beom Seok's hand had trembled when he touched Eleanor's face and whispered vows in accented English and soft Korean. He didn't promise a perfect life, just a life where he would fight to deserve her. Eleanor had believed him. And every day since, he proved her right. She now helped raise Dong fully. Morning routines, bedtime stories, laughter-filled dinners where the little boy insisted she sit right beside him, always. He clung to her hand at school, kissed her cheek when she patched his scraped knees, and proudly introduced her to everyone as Iama. The first time he said it publicly, Eleanor had to turn away so he wouldn't see her tears. The compound, once a fortress, had become a home. But today, something felt different. Eleanor stared at the small test in her hand, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the whole house could hear it. The two faint pink lines glowed like tiny stars. impossible and miraculous. Pregnant. She pressed a hand over her mouth as emotion rose sharp and overwhelming. A shaky laugh slipped out. She hadn't expected this. Not now. Not in this life built on shadows and love and second chances. But as she placed a palm over her belly, something inside her settled. A future. A real one. Before she could move, small footsteps pattered across the hallway. Dong appeared in the doorway, hair messy, eyes bright like always. "Yama?" he asked, blinking up at her. "Are you sad?" "No," she whispered, dropping to her knees. "Come here." He rushed into her arms without hesitation. Eleanor took his small hand and guided it to her stomach. "There's a baby here," she said softly. Dong's mouth fell open. His eyes widened with awe. Then he leaned forward, pressing his cheek gently to her belly. "I'll be a good big brother," he whispered, voice tiny but steady. "I promise." Eleanor's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. A quiet sound came from the doorway behind them. A sharp inhale she recognized instantly. She turned to find Beom Seok standing there, frozen. His usually unreadable face cracked open with shock, disbelief, and something deeper, something fragile. "Eleanor." His voice broke on her name. She rose as he stepped closer, every movement slow, like he feared the moment might vanish if he moved too fast. He dropped to his knees in front of her, just as Dong had moments before. His hands hovered near her waist, trembling. "Is it true?" he whispered. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "Yes." He pressed both hands against her stomach, as though anchoring himself to the reality. His head bowed, his breath stuttered, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were wet for the first time she had ever seen. "You saved my son that night," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "And you saved me." Eleanor cupped his face, thumb brushing the corner of his eye. "We saved each other." Dong wrapped his tiny arms around both of them, pulling them into a clumsy, perfect family hug. Laughter, tears, warmth. They all collided in that single moment, sealing something unbreakable. Later, as Eleanor stood beneath the soft glow of the setting sun, she realized a truth so simple it stole her breath. The scream she'd heard in that dark playground didn't just start chaos. It started a family. She protected a child she didn't know, and that child gave her a life she never expected.